Wait.
It's your turn.
Sorry, guys. Someone just attacked my base and I had to take care of it. This was very important. But now let's get into it. Welcome, everybody. And thank you for being here with us today on the 7th Founder Talks. My name is Amr, and I study my master's in industrial engineering and management. I'm also a committed Clash of Clans player, as you just saw, and an aspiring founder.
And I'm Sophia, studying my master's in automation and electrical engineering. I'm also an avid Heyday fanatic and an aspiring content creator. And between the two of us, our first game development experience actually started from scratch. Literally scratch, the visual coding platform. So naturally, we figured that made us qualified to speak tonight. And although we would love to spend the next hour talking about our obviously elite game development careers, we thought we should bring in someone with just a little bit more experience.
Now, our guest today is an Aalto alumnus from the Industrial Engineering and Management program as well. Shout out to Prodeko, who started his journey early with Sumea and later co-founded Supercell, Finland's largest startup ever and decacorn company behind some of the most influential mobile games in the world. Just last year, Supercell reached a whopping 2.6 billion euros in revenue. Now, in this talk, we will discuss the games, but also we want to discuss about the mindset behind them. So we'll go through the trusts, the leaderships, the risks, and even the failures to really grasp what it takes to keep building over time.
So please welcome to the stage the co-founder and CEO of Supercell, Ilkka Paananen. Hello.
Thank you for coming. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Ilkka, for joining us today. And before we dive deep into the main topics, we've been very curious to learn this about you. Because for context, Sophia and I have known each other since our childhood. And when we were young, we played a lot of your games, especially during break time in school. So that made us a bit curious about the reverse question. So when you were young, what games did you play?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me. It's great to always come to Otaniemi. Like, some really great memories from this place. What did I play when I was growing up? This will make me feel very old, but I guess I was supposed to be a PC gamer. Back in the day when PC meant like something quite different what it means today. Had these floppy disks and these type of things that you guys, most of you probably haven't even seen. But I played games like, say, the original SimCity, Civilization, Dune 2 was a big one for me. I played a lot of the LucasArts games, Secret of Monkey Island, his first adventure games. Well, I basically played everything I could get my hands on, I guess. But simulation games and sort of the strategy games were probably my favorites. And of course, sports games, so NHL hockey.
And did you have a go-to username or some kind of gamer name for any of those games?
I think my username was Bade for some reason. I don't know why.
Bade?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we find you on Bade from anywhere?
Maybe you could go and take a look.
All right, we should go add him on there. And on the topic of game names, I've always wanted to know the origin of the Pekka character from Clash of Clans. Where does the name Pekka come from?
Well, we used to play a game, and it had a character called Dave, and spelled exactly like so with capital letters and dots in between. And then I think the team, and definitely wasn't my idea, but what I've heard from the original Clash of Clans team, and they had this discussion that, okay, what's Dave in Finnish? And of course it's Pekka. So that's where it comes from.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm also curious, why didn't you name it Ilkka instead?
Well, it wasn't my choice, and nothing gets named after me at the company. So being the least powerful CEO. So.
Well, as passionate Supercell gamers ourselves, we thought to contribute our fair share of wisdom and name future character names. And we were thinking if you were to name a character after your own name, Ilkka, we developed a few acronyms to reflect Supercell and yourself. So please take some notes. We have the first one is innovative leader keeping kingdoms advancing. Then we have immortal lethal knight of kingdom attacks. And then my favorite is intelligent leader known for killer apps. What do you think?
Well, not bad, not bad.
Thank you.
I'm
We have
flattered.
we have a lot of other game ideas or
I
name
can't
ideas.
wait.
Yeah, please come reach out to us after
We'll
this
do,
talk.
we'll do. Do you
And-
take like royalties or anything like that? No?
We can discuss that.
Okay, all right.
And although we would love to stay on this topic, we do want to go a little bit deeper into the playbook behind everything that came after. So for the next 35 minutes, we're going to discuss or follow your journey from the beginning and finding out what kind of actions made it all possible. And then after that, we will continue with 15 minutes of Q&A from the audience.
Sound good?
All right.
Yeah. So I'd like to start from your journey at Aalto. You were a student here a bit over 20 years ago. And in a way, it felt like you never left because over the years, you've come back many times as an alumnus, as a speaker, and especially as someone who many students look to when they're thinking of building something of their own. So there is that student version of you, and then there's the Ilkka that comes back years later on the same campus from a different stage of life. So I'd really love to start there and ask you, what keeps you coming back to Aalto?
Well, I guess I'm just like super, grateful to be part of the community. I've learned so much here, made so many great friends, and I remember, being here as a student, and there's people like say Jorma Ollila, came, the CEO of Nokia at the time, came to speak, or Risto Siilasmaa, who, founder of F-Secure. And those type of people who were super inspiring to me, and if I can sort of somehow in a way sort of give back, and so that's why I love always coming here, and it also actually it gives me inspiration and energy as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of us can agree when we say that we resonate with a lot of the things that you said about Aalto fostering a very open community, and I think after I graduate, I will be definitely coming back here a lot as well. I do want to go a little bit deeper into your student years. In the year 2000, you became the CEO of Supercell, which was a startup or game development startup founded by a group of students at a time where the startup ecosystem was still barely existing in Finland. In a research article I read by Jyväskylä University of Applied Sciences, it mentions, though I don't know if this is true, that you partly funded the company with student loans. I wanted to give you a scenario. If you woke up tomorrow morning and you were back as an Aalto student in today's society, would you still make the same investment choice?
100%.
Wow.
And it's true. I mean, we definitely we couldn't. Also, there was I think 7 of us at the time, and we really didn't have almost any money, and then there's and I had a very low cost of living because I had my small solo asunto here in Otaniemi, so the rent was cheap. I hope it still is. So I didn't really need much money, but so the student loan actually so I didn't have to get any kind of salary, which is probably also why they took me. But yeah, but that's how we kind of got the company started.
It's very inspiring to see how you face risk with you just face it head on. And as someone who is seeking to grow their social media platform and kind of exploring their marketing style in today's world, taking big personal risks is something that's very scary to me to face or to even think about. So how did you, as a young student, taking that kind of personal risk shape the way that you think about risk and responsibility as a founder today?
Well, actually, if you think about it, there actually wasn't that much risk. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? Of course, the company fails and you don't make money, but in the worst scenario is that you're out there in the job market and you're looking for a job. So that's the worst case. So it's not the end of the world. So I actually don't think I took much of a risk.
Okay.
Yeah. And you mentioned living in solo, so cell in English. And speaking of cells, Supercell is known for its cell structure. And you once mentioned this shift from best people to best teams. Now, on paper, it sounds like just a small change in wording, but in reality, it feels like a much deeper shift in how you think about excellence. Because once you stop asking who are the best people, and start asking what combinations actually create something exceptional together, I feel like you're actually changing the logic of how you build a company. So I'd like to ask you, what made you shift from best people to best teams?
Probably the realization that it really isn't the and it's you know it's sort of obvious, but you know it's not the individuals. It really is the team, and necessarily like fantastic individuals don't make a great team. And you know we've had put together like what we believe they're like fantastic teams because they just had these like kind of a sort of the best individuals, but then those teams you know sometimes didn't work out, which made us realize that hey, well actually it's about the teams, not the people.
Yeah, and in this case, structure is important. So maybe tell us about your ideal dream team. What does it look like?
Well, first of all, like the ideal dream team, like they have a like crazy high level of ambition. You know, they want to do something that's like not just you know good or great, but you know world class, like unique, something that doesn't really exist yet. You know, and you know we used to say at Supercell that there's no bar, there's only higher. So that's the first thing. So the ambition, you know, whatever you do, kind of you try to shoot for the moon, and that sort of common goal like should unite like everybody in that team. But then the thing is that you know the best teams, I believe, and I've learned this later in my career, are like very diverse. So they are, you know, usually like for example, always my advice is that if you are, for example, founding a company, do not found it with your best friends because oftentimes you know, friends are you know almost like by definition you are like like-minded people and oftentimes you agree on most of the stuff. That's why they're friends and it's nice to talk to them because you agree on stuff. But I noticed that the best teams actually are almost the opposite, that you know people have very different backgrounds, they have very different points of view, but then despite those differences and those different points of view, they can sort of come to an agreement and align on something. But there's something like really magical when that happens, because then if people are different and they think about the problem from different perspectives, and you kind of sort of consider it from all the possible like you know perspectives, and you have all the like data points that you could possibly have, and oftentimes that after like you know a good and oftentimes heated discussion, it usually leads to like better decisions because you have like you can consider all the possible viewpoints.
Yeah. So multidisciplinary teams, maybe even multicultural and like different personalities even.
Yeah, I mean absolutely multicultural. I think that's especially if you work in say consumer, especially if you work in consumer entertainment, it has to be a multicultural team.
And it can be seen how like the teams within Supercell, they kind of act as mini startups themselves. So a lot of the things that you say, a lot of the people in the audience here are aspiring founders as well. So maybe you should take notes on how if you're trying to create your dream team or startup team, the things you should take into consideration.
Yeah, and I think it's very evident that the cell structures that you've created have been performing very well, and they've created many successful games. And I think that another ambitious part of Supercell's mission is not just to create these games, but actually create games that people play for years. And the target users for each game can span across such a wide range of audience, from Gen Alpha elementary school kids like my little brother playing Brawl Stars, to college students like me and Amr playing Clash Royale, and to even middle-aged moms like my mom playing Heyday. And I feel this is something many other companies have not been able to sustain for a long period of time. How do you evolve games in a way that keeps them relevant and engaging across such a wide and changing audience?
Well, you know, it sort of all goes back to the team. So obviously I don't sort of build these games. None of them have been my idea, so all the credit goes to the game teams. But you know, it really is the things that I just said. It's that ambition. It's those like different types of backgrounds, and you know they have this thinking that we call player first. So they are not developing the game for themselves. They are developing the game for the audience, and there's a big difference in there.
Yeah, and there is a lot of success that comes from these structures, but we should also then start targeting a bit of the failure aspect, where Supercell, sometimes you need to kill projects publicly and even painfully. And more recently with Squad Busters. Now, for context, for people that don't know, Squad Busters was a game that was released in 2024 and operated for a couple of years before it was announced that it would be discontinued later this year. more since it didn't reach the high player engagement and standards expected of a global Supercell hit. Now, from the outside, persistence seems to be like celebrated as a founder virtue, but in creative work, I imagine the harder question is not whether to keep believing, but when belief stops being useful. So now, as an aspiring founder myself, I bet and a lot of people in the audience would like to know, when do you know it's time to call something quits, and how do you especially make that decision well?
Yeah, it's an incredibly important and difficult question. I don't think there's a right answer, and ultimately I think it's about like this. I mean, even though we are, of course, like, we get a lot of data, and we are sort of I wouldn't say that we are data driven, but we are maybe like data informed as a company. But ultimately, that it's a judgment call, based on the on the gut and oftentimes what happens is that you put the game out, or a team puts the game out. The team looks at the data, and then we have this rule that as long as the team or a cell believes that they should continue, then they will continue, and if a cell doesn't believe, then obviously then they should stop.
But speaking of judgment, how do you personally tell between a moment that requires more patience versus a moment that requires just letting go of?
No, like I actually I'm in a lucky position that all I need to do is trust my teams and trust their judgment. So thank God it's not my call, because it must be the hardest decision you can imagine. Like imagine that you've poured maybe 3, 4, 5 years of your life into something, and then despite your best, and this game it becomes your baby. It's not a product; it's your baby, and then it doesn't work out. And also like in our case, because the bar is so incredibly high. Like for example, in Squad Busters, it wasn't a disaster. Like I think we got 50 million people at least playing it. It made more than $100 million in revenue, but it just didn't meet the Supercell bar. And therefore the team felt that we're gonna kill it. Because I mean the thing about Supercell is what people don't sometimes understand from the outside, that it's a very like high performance culture. Like nobody wants to be the builder of the 6th best game of Supercell. Just isn't inspiring to anybody. So a game that probably I would say that maybe quite a few companies maybe would have actually kept on developing and building the game. Our team actually decided, no, it doesn't meet the bar. Let's kill it and let's do something else. And that I have a greatest amount of respect for those type of people.
It's very refreshing to listen to you talk about failure in such an honest and open way. And even despite those failures, I feel like Supercell continues to grow and continues to recruit new developers every year. In your more recent blog post that you posted on the Supercell website in 2024, there's a very honest discussion about scale and scaling your company. On the one hand, growth gives you more resources, more resilience, and overall more or bigger room to support big ambitions. On the other hand, growth also puts pressure on the things that made the company special in the first place. So the real question is not whether a company scales or not, but what it quietly demands in return. So as someone such as yourself who's very familiar with building a company from the ground up, please tell us and share us your wisdom on what should be built from scale from the beginning, and where should an early stage founder allocate their limited resources?
Well, I think what you need to focus on is basically like two things. Like it really is the people and teams, and then the culture. I mean, that's the most important thing, and that's the element that will scale. I mean, no matter like what type of superhero you are, I mean, there's limits to like what one human being can do, and I believe that's true even in the age of AI. But what truly can scale, I think, is the culture. And if you create a culture where people can actually create the best work of their careers, where kind of the real multiplier comes in. And the way I think about culture is that my goal is that Supercell has these like best teams. But then how I think about culture is that if you think that these teams are sort of fire, the culture is kind of gasoline that I pour on that fire, and it becomes this like a multiplier, force multiplier on the teams. And for us, what it means in practice, I know that sounds a bit fluffy, but in practice, what it means is that the Supercell culture is all about like shooting for the moon, taking these massive risks, and you know, most of the time those risks fail, and if they fail, then we celebrate the failures and we learn, and you know, that is what the culture is like.
You really highlight the Supercell culture here, and I wanted to know, is this one of the things that became harder to protect at Supercell as it got bigger, or were there some other things that were also difficult to protect?
No, I mean, we are like, in a good way, I think we are paranoid about the culture, and you know, and sometimes it actually has frankly led, you know, us and myself to do also our like biggest mistakes. Like one of them, the famous one, is that you know, because of me and my sort of limited thinking, we actually kept the company even too small for too long. So which meant that we were kind of under-investing in our live games and under-investing in our players. And the reason why I kept the teams small was that I was just so scared what would happen to the culture if we grow too fast. And you know, in hindsight, it was a mistake, which we then realized, or I realized many years later. But then I think the irony actually is that right now I actually feel the company, we are around 900 people now, so now I feel that they are actually, you're never at the perfect size, but I think we are at the size feels great, especially given everything that's actually going on the AI side of things. So, you know, AI, we believe that AI, you know, gives our developers superpowers, and it will be this like amazing boost on creativity and innovation, and it enables like smaller teams to do like much bigger things, and it just happens we actually are very lucky here that we happen to be, I think, exactly their right size. Like if you think about what's the ideal size of a gaming company in this age of AI.
Yeah, and I can really see a lot of impact and investment Supercell has put into AI, especially given opening recently the AI labs, which is really interesting to see what comes out of it. And Supercell is like one of the most admired and admiring gaming companies in the world. And something I really want to know about you is that trust aspect. As a leader is trust, and you briefly mentioned it, talked about it in the earlier questions, but a lot of leaders talk about empowerment, but then when success really matters, they sometimes often go back to control. But what seems to be different about Supercell is that trust seems to be a core part of the operating system, like you talked, as opposed to just a value statement. So what I want to know is that when people say Supercell trusts teams deeply, what does that look like in practice, like in reality?
Well, first thing to realize is that we trust the teams and we trust the effort, but it doesn't mean that we would necessarily trust the outcome. So what it means is that, you know, sometimes people ask me when they recently joined Supercell is that, you know, how, Ilkka, I mean, do you actually trust that this new game team X will do the next hit game? I said, well, no. I mean, nobody can, you know, predict, you know, whether it's going to be a hit game or not. But what I do trust is that they're going to do their very best to make it happen. Whether that actually leads to that outcome we all want, you know, most likely not. I mean, that's just how games work. You know, most of the games you do just will never work out. So that's just how it is. But what I do trust is the sort of effort and you know, thinking player first, and you know, that we're trying to, you know, shoot for a moon and those type of things. So those are the things I trust. And for us, like trust is this foundation that we built the entire company on. So we, you know, as much as possible, we try to limit the amount of like controls and processes and those type of things. And we try to replace that control with this very simple idea called trust. And for us, like, trust is actually very binary. So there's no like, oh, I trust you like 70%. You know, either I trust you 100% or I don't trust you. And if I don't trust you or we don't trust you, then, you know, that team shouldn't exist like inside Supercell.
So during like hiring processes, Supercell focuses more on the ambitions and how the trust aspects more than just what a person applying is like. What have they built in the past? Because I would say like it's also kind of risky to there are risks to trusting people blindly. So what kind of like safeguards does Supercell have to solidify that trust?
Yeah, so like first of all, like when we hire people, like we try to focus on like not on what person can do today, but what can they build tomorrow and day after tomorrow and so on. So what can they become? That's the most important thing. And in my experience, the most important things in practice are, again, you go back to like the level of ambition, like how hungry is that person? Is that person gonna work like super hard and do almost like whatever it takes to reach that goal? And is that person sort of great to work with? And obviously, being trustworthy is the starting point for everything. And we have like a very few safeguards to your question. It's we trust. Well, I think the safeguard that we have is this kind of this chain of trust. So I trust the leaders who report to me when they trust the leaders who report to them and so forth. And we how we can think about it that as long as that chain of trust exists, then we're all good. But the minute it breaks, then we're screwed.
Yeah, and then it must be especially like, and that's what makes Supercell very different. The fact that you have 900 employees and you're still able to keep that trust solidified within the company operations is very fascinating.
Yeah, and it's easy to like talk about it in events like this and celebrate it, but the real test becomes when like something actually isn't going the way you want it to go, and then do you still trust? Or like and in the worst case, something it's not going well, and you actually disagree with the plan to fix it. But do you still trust the team?
Okay.
And I can imagine that giving this level of trust and responsibility to your employees means you're also taking this risk. And I'm sure that not everything works out perfectly all the time.
No, on the contrary, like most of the stuff they do actually fails.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to touch upon that. But first, I want to take the time to congratulate you on your BAFTA Fellowship Award that you saw recently. Let's all give a round of applause. We saw your LinkedIn post. That's how we found out. But my question is actually related to BAFTA, because back in 2016, you had actually given a lecture where you said, quote unquote, failing absolutely sucks, but also that you wanted to create an environment where failing is where you can fail safely. Now, this statement comes from a company with such a high quality bar, and teams are trusted deeply, as you mentioned, and outcomes still matter enormously. When you say failure should be safe, first of all, what do you define as a failure, and what does that look like in practice inside a company with such high expectations?
Well, first of all, I've actually like recently started to like avoid the word failure, and the reason is that like actually like how we try to think this way. It's easier said than done, but like we've kind of talked about this in the company. But what if we would start to treat our like new games as like almost like scientific experiments where you first do a hypothesis and then you do a test, and the test is either true or false. And it does actually, and it doesn't matter whether it's true or false. In either case, you learn something about it. So what if you would start to think about the new products that way? So then there's no like sort of success and failure. But again, easier said than done, especially when these creative people have poured their hearts and souls to the game, etc. But that's still like ideally that is how we would think about quote unquote failure.
Would you be open to giving us an example, maybe other than Squad Busters, about a failure that came unexpectedly and maybe how you were able to overcome it?
Well, maybe like one of the biggest. I obviously made like huge amount of mistakes like in my life, and my intention is to keep on making them. But because that's when I like, and if I keep on failing, that tells to me that I'm actually trying to do something that's very hard, and I'm taking risks. So it's a good thing. But probably like the most gigantic mistake that I've done in the recent years is exactly what I just spoke about. So I failed to see that our culture is was like limiting us, like what we could do for our customers, meaning the players, and by artificially like keeping the teams too small and under-investing in those teams. So that's a kind of gigantic failure from last 5 years.
Yeah, but on the bright side, there are many successes, or from not failures, but from learning experiences, scientific evidence, as you mentioned. And Supercell released a Clash Royale, a multiplayer defense game, tower defense game, in 2016 with explosive success, which reached, was it like $1 billion in revenue in just a year? And then Brawl Stars was released soon after and followed that same path of success. And from the outside, it is easy to credit the strength to the games themselves. But you also mentioned that you do credit a lot of the success to the teams. But are there other factors, or who else do you credit this secret to skyrocketing success to?
Well, I think like if you want to be successful in the games business, you sort of need like three things. Like on a high level, you need these like world-class teams, and then I say world-class, I truly mean world-class. I mean they have to be the very best in the world what they do. Then you need to have this culture that you know is that you know force multiplier on the teams, and then the third thing that you need is luck. And oftentimes luck, you know, is what it means in practice is that you just happen to put somehow like the right type of a game out at the right at the right time, and then you know like you know things just start to happen, and you know our like biggest hits are like these sort of like viral hits, and they just become these phenomena, and you can't really like force a phenomena to happen. It you know just sometimes we say that hit games are almost like accidents that happen, but then our job and my job as a leader is to create an environment that sort of maximizes the probability of those accidents happening.
So just to recap, first work class, culture, and luck. Okay, I will remember those and keep them in mind.
And everyone take notes as well.
Yes, please. Another very iconic and very successful series of games were released in 2012 with Clash of Clans, a tower defense game, and then Heyday, a farm simulation game, within only 1 month apart, as one of the most popular games that people still play to this day. After so many years, what's unique here is that these weren't just successful games. They were games that offered completely different types of gaming experiences. Like one is a stressful multiplayer like battling game, and then another one is like a stress-free, slow-paced farm simulation game. They each require its own kind of creative focus and long-term development. So how were you, as the decision maker, able to support two completely different games growing at the same time without losing focus or quality?
Well, you know, Supercell is we built the company, you know, in a very different way compared to like most of the other gaming companies, and especially at the time when they founded it in 2010, it was a pretty radical idea. But the idea was very simple. Like we wanted to just to be the best place for the best teams to build the best games, and what that meant is that kind of the leadership would only focus on two things, which is to build these best teams and you know create this culture that I just spoke about, and then everything else would be up to the teams. And you know, all credit on Clash and Heyday it just very simply goes to the world-class teams that built them.
Yeah, and also if we kind of track back to your beginnings, when you first started your journey in the leadership role in Sumea, you said in an interview back in 2013 that the lack of knowledge and experiences in that moment led to many mistakes along the way. And I feel like that kind of hit a part of me, because as an early stage founder that's still like bracing for the countless mistakes I will come to learn from my founding process. I want to also hear an example from you. Like, would you like to share an example of a early mistake you made with the Sumea, and how you were able to overcome that?
You know, when we founded Sumea, or actually I was invited to be part of the group, I was super lucky. I mean, I had like exactly like 0 days of work experience. I only had I only had summer jobs, and you know, I never had a real job. And I guess if you would ask my mom, she would tell you that I've never had a real job in my life, but that's a different story. But yeah, you know, like I mean, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I had only read about business from books, actually here, and done some case studies, and that was it. But you know, I think the most important thing about founding the company is, is to found it and jump on the train and get on the journey, and you're gonna make a million mistakes, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the mistakes actually don't matter at all. I mean, what matters is that how do you react when you make those mistakes. And we made all the possible mistakes with Sumea. Like we probably hired a lot of people we should not have hired. We made bad commercial deals. Like you name it. We made them all.
And what's life without a little risk anyway?
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that this really puts things into perspective, because many early startup founders or just many people that are interested in building their own startups may be sitting here today and was in the similar position that you were in when you founded Sumea. And now we've had this opportunity to talk about your mistakes, your failures, and even your success stories.
Yeah, maybe actually one thing that I do want to share with the audience about the mistakes is the other thing that I've also learned later on in life is that sometimes you can't tell whether it was a mistake or not. And I can give you a couple of examples. So, for example, when I was studying here, I was applying for certain jobs, summer traineeships. I mean, in industrial management. I don't know if it's still the thing, but at that time the thing was that there's basically two jobs people wanted. One was investment banker and one was management consultant, preferably in London, of course. And people were fighting for these traineeships and applying for them. And I also, of course, applied for them and I never got any. And I don't think they even invited me to an interview. And I was crushed when that happened. But later on, I'm thinking that I actually got pretty lucky, because I mean, if imagine I had gotten that job, I mean, then there would be no Sumea, definitely no Supercell. So that's one example. The other one is that for the longest time, when they actually sold Sumea to Digital Chocolate, when the Digital Chocolate, despite all the great people and all the best efforts, it really didn't almost go anywhere in the end. And for the longest time, I thought that this is a massive mistake. Why on earth did we sell it to Digital Chocolate, and why did we do this deal? But then later on, I've been thinking that, well, thank God Digital Chocolate didn't work out, because it didn't work out, and I made so many mistakes at Digital Chocolate. Then we actually did. That's exactly why we built Supercell. Based on all of those learnings. So again, the failure actually was a beginning of something, a big success. When you fast forward to Supercell, our original strategy was actually based on these kind of desktop web games and Facebook games. And now it sounds crazy. Back at the day, it made sense, because that was actually the platform with the widest reach. Well, it didn't work out. Thank God it didn't work out, because that made us look at to mobile. And there's so many of these examples that I could give you, that there's been what felt like a failure at the time, now in hindsight, was people got actually very lucky.
And you think that's how you've just developed the idea of trusting things will just work out their own way? You just have to sometimes go through the path.
Exactly, and that's why I feel that one of the most important qualities in a great founder is resilience. You fall down, but then you take a breather, you get up and you start running again, and then you fall down, and it just keeps on repeating and repeating. But but because ultimately you love what you're doing, and it's not so much about the outcome, it's about the journey. Then you just keep on doing it, and that's I think that's how I think the best founders that I've met in my life, that's exactly who they are.
It seems like your life has been a roller coaster of failures and successes, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours about the different failures that you've had to overcome, and I would learn so much from them. But I think that for the final question for tonight, I do want to ask you is, what is your final advice for new startup founders and game developers today, some of which may be sitting in the audience right now?
Well, the most important thing is that, if you're still wondering whether you should start, then start. Jump on that train, start the journey. That's the only way. And then you just assume that you're gonna make millions of mistakes, but don't worry about it. Learn from them, and it's and ultimately like also like remember to enjoy the journey. I mean, enjoy like every minute and be kind of grateful what you have, and maybe like don't be like, obviously we all are ambitious and we wanna like get the best possible outcome. But I always say that because it's relatively unlikely that you kind of reach the outcome that you want, so therefore that shouldn't be maybe the main driver. I mean, you should really like learn like to enjoy that roller coaster ride with all those ups and downs, and then form a great team around you, because a great team like it makes those losses and those failures feel a little bit less bad, but then makes like winning feel even better.
Thank you so much for the advice. I think that this is a beautiful note to end our part of the conversation on. But the nice thing is, it doesn't even have to stop here. We have so many founders, builders, and curious minds sitting here today who have their own questions about founding, games, leadership, and everything in between. So let's give this chance to the audience for Q&A. Raise a hand if you have a question, and someone will hand you a microphone. And please stand up when you're asking your question.
Hi. Oh. So you were recently given a mystery plane ticket by your team and told, trust me, just go. And it ended up taking you to the north of Finland for a hackathon. I'm curious, what was going through your mind when you were back building as a participant in the hackathon?
Well, it felt really good. Our group was this, I guess you could call us like game industry veterans. Like we had Jani, who had been, I think, he was probably like one of the first game developers in this country. He had been to the industry, I think now like 3 decades, and we had people like him, a few in the group. So it sort of it felt pretty good. It also reminded me like how. I mean, I actually don't maybe miss the sort of about old days that much, but it was a fun memory.
Yeah, over here.
Oh.
Hey, thanks Ilkka for the talk. It's Igor, ex-Hype. I have a very cultural question. So I moved to Finland 2 years ago, and I learned about SISU concept. Can you explain what SISU means and what's SISU for you?
SISU. So I think like the closest word that I can think of is actually that resilience. That you just keep continuing, like even though it's stressful and it can be painful at times, and somehow you find ways and you can learn to love the struggle, if you will, and you start to like love the grind. That is like what I think SISU in entrepreneurship is about.
We had a question over here in the front. Please stand up.
Hi Ilkka, nice to meet you. My name is Oskari, and my question to you is, what is your definition of success?
Great question. I guess like the ultimate success for me is that you've created something that is like world class, it's unique, and something like didn't exist before. That's the kind of ultimate, goal for me. That you can bring something new, something great, something fantastic to this world that hopefully will then be remembered for a long time.
Perhaps over there.
I think Supercell is in the same position as Nokia and Angry Birds once were. has this impacted Supercell and you?
Well, I don't know if you're in the same position, but maybe like what you're referring to is that also like we've been lucky and we've been we've had these successes. I think we sort of the hardest thing like that comes with these successes is to it's actually not that difficult to like be successful, but what's super difficult is to kind of try to repeat that success, and especially in the games, which is an extremely hits-driven industry. And then like oftentimes what happens, and it almost happened to us, was that we almost like became like victims of our own success. So what we kind of did was that we kind of looked backwards and we were asking like okay, these things that we believe made us successful, we were kind of holding on to them and sort of almost like there's this natural tendency to keep on repeating the stuff that you think made you successful instead of like looking ahead and trying to think outside the box and think that okay, what are the new things we should do differently to like recreate that success.
Yeah. Perhaps let's go over there in the middle. Please stand up.
Hello, I'm Carla. You are also the founder of Illusian, founder of this, which supports startups and scale-ups, but also has a philanthropic branch. Why have you decided to also go into the philanthropic area, and is there some outcome or result of Illusion that you're especially proud or happy of having contributed to?
Yeah, I am very proud of it, and it's one of those things that has given me a lot of energy and inspires me. And we started the philanthropic effort long time ago with my co-founder Mikko, and I still remember the discussion. We were having lunch and we were just kind of just trying to like pinch ourselves because we Clash of Clans and Heyday were like growing like crazy, and obviously that also made us like financially very successful, and we just couldn't believe like how lucky we had become, and then we were thinking like, hey, like how could we? I mean, would there be a way to kind of help other people who've been like less lucky than we are? And then we had this idea that okay, let's set up this foundation, and we donated like some Supercell shares to the foundation, which gave it then in the end pretty nice amount of like kind of starting capital. And then we were thinking that okay, like what cause should we focus on? And then for us, like one of the things that we believe like makes Finland a really great place, to grow up is that we sort of like I still want to believe that actually the American dream is more possible in Finland than it's in America. So and what I mean by that is that no matter where you come from, everybody should have pretty much the equal chance to be successful, and at least both me, Mikko, and I like had that opportunity, and we wanted to like somehow like contribute at least a little bit to kind of to making sure that other people would have that same opportunity as well. And maybe it's been a bit or at that time it was already concerning, and now I think it's even more concerning that we maybe even the Finnish society like it's becoming a bit more like polarizing, and it's like it's not maybe as equal as it was like when I was growing up. So and we wanted to do at least our small share to make that better. And how we then are trying to do it is that we kind of approach like this charitable efforts like how you would actually approach building startups. So it's all about the team. We are very big on technology. We actually are building our own, and we have our own tech team in the foundation, and those type of things.
Amazing.
My name is Valeria, and I actually have two questions, if it's allowed. The first one is, you talk a lot about luck, and I just wonder, is there some way that you try to attract it, or is it something that just like comes out of the ether and kind of drops on you? So
Well, I guess the cliche is that luck needs to be earned, and the way you earn it is that you work super hard and you just don't give up, and you're resilient. So in a way, you give luck a chance, if you will. But then there's other things, like for example, before I go to play ice hockey, I always put my left skate first. And that brings me luck sometimes.
How about you first? Then we can go to the back. Yeah. Oh, okay. Next one there.
Hi Ilkka. I would like to ask you, how do you see the access to generative AI tools shaping the gaming industry, and what kind of effects it will have in the future, and perhaps what kind of effects it has already had?
Yeah, well, it's easier to say like what impact this has had. It's super hard to say like what type of impact it will have in the future. I wish I knew. But this AI, I think the thing to realize about this AI, and I know you guys probably are all over it, but like say that, the thing about AI is that how fast it's developing, and it's not this linear development, it's this exponential development. And just to give you an idea, like I would say that less than a year ago, like when we were talking about AI, it was actually quite hard to find like really great concrete examples where it actually has made a real business impact. And sometimes even when I was talking about AI, like people were sometimes looking at me and rolling their eyes, and oh, here he goes again, and it's all hype and all that. But then I think like something actually happened, I would say, as little as like 3 or 4 months ago. Because I think something like clicked. I think it probably was a release of maybe Claude Opus, I think it's 4.6 or something, where like things like really started to accelerate. And my favorite question to ask our engineers is whenever I see them over lunch or something, is that like how much has AI increased your productivity? And I think if the answer, say, in the summer last year was around, depending of course who you ask, but it was anywhere between 0 to maybe 15%. Was probably the maximum I heard. I actually today asked the same question, and the answer was anywhere between 50 to almost 150%. And so some people say that it feels like that the sort of the imaginary like productivity or the impact of these tools, it feels like it's almost like doubling every 2 to 3 months. And you think about it, like like just draw that curve with your eyes, like it, and if that kind of type of pace continues, where will we be in 2 to 3 years? It's pretty crazy. And I think the short answer is what will happen in the future, and it's already like happening, is that much smaller teams can build much better products, which is of course great.
Yeah. We had a question there. Yeah, this was waiting for a bit. We can go there after.
Thank you for an interesting speech, and many thanks for being on Startup Investor. That's really needed in Finland. I would also have 2 questions. I'd like to be very quick. First, I would like to ask how you see the future of gaming industry. Is it some virtual reality, extended reality, 3D, 4D, holograms, some technology I haven't heard about? And what do you see, what are the main characteristics for a good game developer? If you take 3 or 4, like creativity must be one. Those 2 questions.
Great. First one is easy. I have no idea. I get a lot of invitations to these like future of games panels, and I decline every one of them because I just don't know, and I don't think anybody knows. And all I can do in my job is to again like make sure we have the best teams, best creative people, and the best culture. What makes a great developer? It's a great question. I feel obviously you have to be creative, but I feel like many of these great developers, they are like I think the one misconception about game development is that somehow they are like kind of engineering like crafts or those type of things. I think you should think more games as a form of art, and these are like artists who want to express themselves in a way that, as a painter would express herself through a painting. And and that I feel that's kind of very much true about games, and it is but they kind of the tool that they express themselves via is the game. So you but to do that well, you have to actually like follow like the of course games, but all forms of pop culture, books, comics, movies, music, etc. And you somehow you have to have like good taste, like what fun actually feels and looks like, and it's hard to kind of define it in any better.
Yeah, we can have the one final question. Like a quick question and answer.
All right. So I would like to ask about trust. You said earlier that you have earlier mistake in hiring wrong people, but for you specifically, what are the indicators that tell you to stop trusting the individual?
It's ultimately it's always a judgment call, and it's a mix of like different type of inputs. I mean, of course, it's like what I observe myself, and over years, of course, you develop some kind of pattern recognition that, oh, I've seen this before. And then, of course, the danger there is that, that you don't become victim of this kind of confirmation bias, that you kind of you think that you know what's going to happen, then you only look for signs of exactly that happening. And then guess what? Of course, when you're gonna find those signs. But then it's talking to other people, like it's a great indicator. Like, do other people trust that person? And it's a little bit like developing that kind of 360 view of the situation. But ultimately, it's a kind of a judgment call, and it's I guess based on gut.
Yeah. Oh, and there are, I bet, a lot of questions that we can stay here all day and ask you, and there's some questions we can even get through. But we want to thank you so much, Ilkka, for being here with us today again, and for sharing your reflections so openly. I think we can speak on behalf of the audience when we say we've gained so much insight through your experiences. And I would also like to thank everyone here in the audience and everyone watching remotely. And we hope to see you in the next Founder Talks with Maija Itkonen next month. But for now, let's give another round of applause, one final applause to Ilkka Paananen.
Thank you.